Oh geez, I forgot about the gun. So as you can tell, this ended up taking much longer than I expected it to. Part of this was time management, the other part was sanding and watching paint dry. But enough with excuses, back to the build. I removed the last of the supports from the model, and then progressed on to sanding the model down, starting with 40 grit sandpaper, and then working my way up through to 240 grit. For the finer details of the gun, I used a rotary tool to better define the edges and keep them sharp. I used the same tool with a very rough sandpaper head to do some of the more odd-shaped parts. Once I thought it was smooth enough, I cleaned the parts off with isopropanol and glued the two halves of the gun together with superglue. I gave these a short while to dry before getting out the wood filler. This stuff absolutely stinks, by the way, definitely does not smell good for you, and I'd advise wearing some kind of mask and doing this somewhere well ventilated. I cut the plastic spatula that came with it into smaller pieces so that I could get into the gaps and smooth them out. This took a couple of hours to dry to the point that was properly sandable, and then began my version of hell. I sanded the parts smooth, then cleaned them, then sprayed them black with primer, then I sanded them, then I filled them, then I sanded them again, and sprayed them again. Until finally... Now that they're as smooth as they're going to get within my time constraints, we can get on to painting them properly. They still weren't quite as smooth as I would have liked, but this was my punishment for choosing such a rough printing option to begin with. I'm using frog tape to mask off the parts of the model I don't want sprayed, and then using a scalpel to neaten up the edges. I've chosen frog tape over masking tape because it's much more gentle and delicate paints. By the way, for painting I'm using this as a reference, link in the description to the artist's page below. So, based off of that, I'm going for a deep red for the design on the handle. I'm attaching the handle using a strip of double-sided foam tape. It works quite well. Even better when you remove the protective covering. I'm using an airbrush, but a can of spray paint would have done well too. I was fed up with the parts swinging wildly when I hung them using strings, so I decided to make a stand for the gun. Oops, I didn't really mean to do that. Oh well. Much better. Really, this worked out way better than I expected it to. First coat for the main body was gunmetal, which came out much darker than I expected. So for the second coat, I went over it with steel, which looks much closer to my reference pieces. The handle turned out really well. It's actually one of my favourite parts of this build, especially once I gave it a coat of clear satin, which I forgot to film. Oops. The same clear coat was applied to the gun's fuel cell and to its body. This was to protect the delicate paint underneath. Time to finally put it all together. The paint came out far better than expected, but it does sadly show off some of the areas where I wasn't able to get the gun as smooth as I wanted to. I went for Araldite rather than superglue because I needed something that would fill as well as bond. This was just to ensure there was a really good bond between the two parts. I didn't want the handle coming off later. So far the project is coming along really well, but I'm not done just yet. There are decals to add as well as weathering and aging to be done. But I'll save this for the next video. Bye!